Welcome. My name is Ellen Watts. I'm here for the Ask Me Anything Dental School Application Program. My background, I do have dental school admissions committee experience. I was the director of admissions at Columbia Dental School for 14 years. Earlier in my career, I then moved on as the assistant dean for pre-health in the post-baccalaureate program at Columbia, and then moved to Fordham College, Rose Hill, which is the campus in the Bronx, and pulled together the pre-health program there for a number of years. I am thrilled to be partnering with Leland and providing answers for all of you about dental school admissions this evening. Please scan the QR code if you'd like to work with me. I actually am offering 10% off any of the packages I have through the end of this calendar year, so through December 31st. And those can be used into the next application cycle. I am excited to answer any questions that you guys might have. So I think what we're going to do is put these questions through the chat, or some of you, if you want to, can feel free to speak up and ask any questions that you might have. Let's see where we stand. What do I have here? Okay, first question. How do we make the application stand out when applying late in the cycle? That is a great question. What's important to remember is that the cycle opens in June and it goes as long as certain programs want it to go. So some people will have a December 1st deadline, some will have an April 15th deadline. It could be anywhere within there. What you want to do if you're applying late is to make sure your personal statement is very tight and on point, because if they are screening applications late in the cycle, you have to be honest and understand they've probably looked at 1,000 or more and they're seeing the same things over and over again. And you want to kind of grab somebody with that personal statement. So you want to make sure that they understand what you bring to the table. So if you're applying late, you really should have strong grades and strong boards, right? You can't ask a school to read deep into this application when you're coming in late in the process and half or more of the seats have already been offered to people. What it is important to remember, though, is that in the first cycle on December 15th, when the first set of acceptances are sent out, that you might have people who interviewed at 6 places and got into 4 places. They're only going to accept one of those 4 offers. So those 3 other schools are going to have 1 more seat available than they anticipated, right? So you have to go into it understanding that once you get into January, this interview process is going to kick up again. It's going to be a little tougher to get interviews late in the season, but if you have good boards and you have good grades and you have good experiences, you're going to be one of the people who gets noticed. Let's say, how important are leadership roles like being on the executive board of a student organization? What it takes to get into dental school, as I've mentioned, are boards and DATs, right? The metrics. They have to know that you are up to the task of succeeding, and particularly the first 2 years, the basic sciences. But they don't just ask you for a transcript and a DAT score. They want to know who you are. They're bringing together a community of people every single application cycle. So leadership roles, involvement in the community, anything that you do that might not even be official. Maybe you're a caretaker for a family member. Maybe you are someone who is babysat to pay your way through school. Maybe you have a waitressing or a waiter job to pay your way through school. All these things are very important because it's saying a lot about who you are as a person and the type of person they're going to be bringing into the community. So don't think anything that you have done that you're bringing to the table is not important. List everything in your work and activities that had a substantial impact on your time and what you learned about dealing with people. Certainly being a waiter or waitress when you deal with people, that's somewhat similar to being a practitioner, right? And having people in your dental chairs. So those things are important, but they do not just have to be elected e-board positions. As for letters of rec, and my professors are looking for some guidelines for the letter. You can go on the ADEA website and they will give you guidelines for letters of recommendation. A letter of rec should not be a personal reference from a professor. It should talk about you academically and what you bring to the table. And you really don't want it to be more than 1 page long or so. But there are guidelines out there that you can access. Professors should have a pretty good idea of what they want to put in a letter of recommendation. You might want to give them a resume or something like that also, so they know who you are. If you are getting a committee letter from your school, that letter will likely talk about biographical data about you. But if you're not, the professors might want to say, this is who she is, this is what she's majoring in, this is where she comes from. But all that information is readily available. Someone who completed the DAT in November, when do you think interviews will likely be conducted for that person? Again, you're coming in deep into the application cycle. If your DATs are good, I would say rarely, if ever, have I seen strong DATs be passed up. So just sit tight if you're happy with those scores. How do you know if your application is competitive enough for the Ivies? The Ivies are strong programs, but they're not the only programs, and they're not different in terms of the quality student they look for. Ivy League dental schools are Columbia, Harvard, and Penn. You want to make sure in any application that you apply as early as you possibly can if you're trying to go to one of these elite programs, not because schools will judge you for not applying early, but it gives you the best chance to be noticed, right? You're in that first batch of applications. But they're looking for a well-rounded, all-around applicant. So I'm looking for strong grades. I'm looking for strong boards. I'm looking for a lot of leadership. I'm looking for someone who understands the profession and knows what the possibilities are. You don't have to be zeroed in on orthodontics or oral surgery or something like that, but you want to be knowledgeable about what you can do. They want someone coming in the door who is going to serve their community well, be well educated, be well rounded. So everything you do, try and look at what that says about you and what you bring to the table and talk about your experiences that way, right? How you talk about these experiences can really propel you when someone's reading about it. You're not just saying, oh, I volunteered at a dental office. You're really getting into details about what you learned about that. What the dentist taught you, what works, what's good with patients, what you learned about patients, what you learned about socioeconomic levels and cultural competence, everything that you are going to see when you get into the dental school clinics and beyond. I've applied without the DAT score. Do I have a chance? Your application would not be complete. The DAT is required everywhere with the exception of High Point University in North Carolina. If you haven't applied there, definitely do, but other schools will be waiting for your DAT scores to come in. With getting my bachelor's from community college, put my application in disadvantage. I don't believe the community colleges offer bachelor's. I think it's all associate's degrees. However, if I am incorrect, and that is the case, you want it to be a strong program that's well known. The community college system, particularly in California, is very strong, very well known. Same with Texas. So you might want to look into that. But also in your personal statement, explain the reason for this, right? It's likely financial or geographical. So explain your decisions, why you made the choices you made and why it works for you. And that's going to tell them a lot about you. How soon do they give you a notification that you're offered an interview before you're expected to go? Schools will be really understanding about this, right? They know that you may have exams, you may be working full time. What they'll usually say is go on this website and choose a date or call this phone number and choose a date. They may say late in the cycle, you know, we only have X number of dates left that we're offering in the month of January, but they understand that people have to make arrangements, right? So if you have things that are very busy, you can always call the school and say, hey, there's just simply no way I can go on that date. They absolutely will work with you. What does the school look for overall? I'm a fresh graduate having dental assistant experience and working as a hygienist now. My GPA is 3.01, but having a hard time with TOEFL. Does the school rely on the TOEFL? Well, they're going to want to know that you're able to communicate with the patients, right? So work very hard if you can to kind of get that TOEFL up. If your GPA is 3.0 overall, what is your science GPA? Biology, chemistry, physics. Schools are looking for that, but of course you look like you have a lot of really strong experience in the field, so you're going to be able to talk about that as well. When should I have my application in? When might start to be considered late? It just is a school to school situation. So they're understanding that you are bringing your best to the table. Maybe you didn't apply because you hadn't completed one of the courses. Try and kind of explain yourself somewhere in that application and let them know. You know, early is certainly considered the very, very beginning, right? Early for dental school applications would be applying in June, May, they open in May, you're able to submit in June. That would be early. Late would be January, right? You're applying at the very kind of tail end of things. But again, good boards, good DATs will be noticed by schools. Is it important how many summer courses there are in the transcript? Is it even considered? It all depends, right? If you have a degree in English and you took every single one of your summer courses at a local university, or your science courses rather, at a local university, schools are going to say, we don't know what this person is going to do in a full term with more in-depth coursework. If you are taking a Orgo 2 to catch up because you dropped it maybe, or you're taking your physics over the summer to get ahead, it's something schools have seen. If you're a biology major or a chem major, you don't have that much more to worry about. Apologize, I just realized that my video was off. If you are a STEM major, you have a lot of science credits during full terms as well, so they're able to see how you do under those conditions. If you're only taking the coursework in the summer, those can be seen somewhat as abbreviated courses, and doing a lot of different ones in the summer could be seen as you taking a shortcut. That doesn't feel fair to say that, because there's a lot of reasons why people do it, but if they're all done in the summer, it does raise some red flags. How's the section disadvantaged applicant interpreted by admissions? It absolutely is not bad. They're saying if you are coming from a situation where socially, economically, perhaps you're a new immigrant, perhaps you come from an underserved community, that has an impact on your academics. So schools want to know those details. Be very honest in there, but do not hesitate to tell them why you consider yourself to be disadvantaged in some way. It's very important how you spell this out to them, but make sure that you do if there's something you want them to know about you. Never seen as a bad thing at all. Is a committee letter preferred? If your school has a committee letter, please get one. It makes life for the admissions team much easier, and it allows them to put a spotlight on everything that is good about you. The school is invested in getting you into dental school, right? Let's say you went to XYZ University. The more people they get into the dental school, they're going to be able to advertise. They get strong number of students into professional schools. So they're going to really put the information together the way that the admissions committees in the professional schools want to hear it. So if they do have that process, take advantage of it. If you don't take advantage of it, that also raises a question as to, we're very familiar with XYZ University. We know they write a great committee letter. Why did this person not avail themselves? Perhaps they weren't allowed to. Maybe there was an academic issue. And schools will make assumptions, as unfair as that feels. So if you have that opportunity, do it. If your school doesn't have a committee letter, don't worry about that. There's nothing that you could do to change that factor. And so schools are aware of that. They know who has one and who doesn't have one. So don't worry about that. How important is a PAT if the other section scores are strong? Is a lower PAT a red flag? A lower PAT could be seen as a red flag, but if there's something you do in the real world that shows an extreme amount of coordination, eye-hand coordination and manual dexterity, perhaps you knit, you're an artist, you play an instrument, something like that, you're going to want to really stress that in your application. The PAT is seen as really just kind of a, 45 minutes in a one-day exam. And if you can turn around and say, hey, this is not a good indicator of how I can do, I am an accomplished sculptor, or I have done watercolor paintings for 15 years, or I am a musician and I play a stringed instrument. You're really going to be able to say that in the real world, you're stronger. But lower DAT scores in some sections, schools don't want to bring down their average. They want to get the highest average they can. So it depends on how low it is, and it depends on how much you're going to be able to counteract it. Students get negatively impacted if they take a 5th year of undergrad. Absolutely not. You apply when you are ready. Don't worry about any of that. No one is saying, should have done this, should have done that. The only time the number of years you're an undergrad may be looked at askance is if you're there for too few years. If you graduate in 2 years, schools are like, where's the maturity we're looking for? This person's only 19 or 20 years old. We're bringing them in with an average class age sometimes of 24, 25. How are they going to fit into that mix, right? But if you took a little bit of extra time and for your own reasons, for academic reasons, for personal reasons, not an issue whatsoever. What is the role of diversity in the school? Do they really care that I'm the only one who's applying for my country? Absolutely, they care. The idea of having a diverse population is that patients are going to feel comfortable when they start to kind of look around the clinic and see that all different people are represented, right? They like the idea that this is just not some sort of an elite profession and we're only bringing in, one type of citizen from one country. They want to know that they have all kinds of people who are treating all kinds of people who live within the community. You also learn a tremendous amount from people who have had a different background from your own. So this is wonderful for the class as well. There's cultural competency opportunities. There's a chance to understand that not everyone came from the same background that I did. So I'm meeting people from all different countries. That's fantastic. It's expanding my understanding of people. And this is at its core a profession where you have to be able to work with people, understand people, appreciate people. So diversity of all factors is important. Academic diversity, cultural diversity, anything you can imagine, diversity of experiences, it's all a good thing. COVID wasn't a factor for me, but back-to-back hurricanes in Florida has been a problem. Wow, you write about that in your personal statement or your disadvantaged statement. The whole country is aware of what's happened in Florida as well as North Carolina this year, but in past years, the devastation. And that I'm sure has had a tremendous impact. You can bet that the dental schools in Florida are aware. I work with a lot of students who live in Florida and are applying to those schools. And they had to delay some interviews by 6 or 7 weeks because of the damage done by the hurricanes. They just weren't ready to bring people in yet. So yeah, you want to talk about that. It shouldn't be, well, if it was life-changing enough that you want it to be the focus of your essay, that absolutely is something you could do, but also the disadvantaged section would be a great place to go into detail about how that had an impact on you. And you're going to want to try and say how you were able to somehow serve that community as well. You were hit by it. And so how did you help your neighbors and how did they help you? That's really important stuff. And I'm sorry that happened to you. That sounds terrible. Let's see. I took ALP classes when I first started college since I didn't do high school here. If they are college level classes, yes, absolutely include them. You want to talk about how English is not your first language. Coming in being bilingual, trilingual, multilingual is a great thing. So there are going to be patients out there who you're going to be able to communicate with better than other people. Miriam, what is a committee letter? Certain pre-health offices offer a letter that is authored by the pre-health committee. If your school had one, you would likely know about it, but ask your advisor if there is a pre-health committee at your college, or you could even just Google it. Hold on one sec. Let's see. Any advice for reapplicants? I have a reapplicant package actually that I work with people on. You want to really kind of look at your application with a critical eye, right? Are your grades where they should be? Are your DATs strong? Did you apply early enough in the cycle that you got a good look? Do you have enough experience? Did you talk about your application and your experiences in a way that really allowed the reader to understand what you were bringing to the table? You want to make sure you look at that application with a critical eye and see maybe what had gone wrong. And I enjoy doing that with people because I can really go through it and say, hey, if this was me, here's why I would not have chosen you for interview, right? So this is something that we can work on that you could change. What do I recommend as an undergraduate major? I love this question. Major in whatever you're interested in, Rose. Anything that you are interested in, and just do the pre-dental coursework around that. It can be really fascinating to have someone who's majored in history or philosophy or graphic design or visual arts or math or anything in addition to the chemistry and biology coursework. That just shows me you're intellectually curious and you're bringing different tools on how to think. I've had business majors before, bringing a kind of a different set of problem solving tools to the table and a different awareness of other disciplines is always a good thing for dentistry. Any colleges I'd recommend. Whatever college works for you, right? Don't feel you have to break the bank. State schools are always a fantastic option because a lot of people struggle to pay tuition. So you want to make sure that you're going somewhere that works for you financially, and then just make everything work around it. Not everyone who applies to dental school went to Stanford or Columbia or University of Chicago undergraduate. Don't worry about that. Do as well as you can wherever you are. My school has a committee letter. I'm not able to apply this cycle because I want to have all my classes finished by this summer. Yeah, you can apply, you can explain that in your application, right? Just say it did not work for me. I tried to make it work, but my application cycle, the timing of my courses and the work that I had to do to pay for school, I wasn't able to make it work. You also might want to appeal to your school and just say, no, please don't exclude me from this. I'm doing the best I can, but I'm kind of carrying a heavy load and I'll be ready a couple months later. See if they might say yes. If my science GPA is 3.3, my DAT is 25. Am I a strong applicant? Well, you know, those numbers certainly look acceptable. DAT looks great. 3.3 is in the range of what schools would consider. I can't say whether you would be a strong applicant or not because I don't know the trajectory of your courses. I don't know your experience. But certainly kind of you are there with the metrics. But as I said, there's so much more. They don't just want your transcript and your DATs. There's a lot that you have to put forward. They're going to want to see the essay and the application really be kind of singing about what you've done. What makes a compelling personal statement? Excuse me, I'm battling a bit of a cold. So the personal statement, it can be a real challenge for a lot of people. But I like to work with students and say, let's start with 10,000 characters. Tell me everything about why you want to do this, and then we'll pull it down to size, right? It doesn't have to be unique in that no one's ever seen these experiences before, because a lot of you are coming from the same point of view, right? You all want to be dentists, so it stands to reason that you may have had some common experiences. Maybe braces changed your life. Maybe your dentist gave you your smile back after you fell off your bike. Maybe you saw a family member, or maybe you regained a tremendous amount of confidence after you had orthodontia, right? Just because a lot of people say these things doesn't make them valid. So you want it to be as authentic as possible. That's the most important thing. Is it important to have consistent shadowing, or would it be okay to do if it was done one time period like a summer? Well, if you just do 1 3-month shadowing experience, then 3 years later you apply to dental school, schools are going to be a little bit suspect and say, you know, if you wanted to be a dentist, you did have an opportunity to volunteer and shadow different places. So you want to try and do it a little more regularly and not just kind of a one-shot deal. So do the best you can to get involved. You can also be volunteering different places. You could volunteer in a hospital with the hospital dentistry department if they would accept you there. So there's a lot of different things you could do, but you do want to kind of bring more than one limited experience to the table. Can you submit false scores? If you mean your grades, there are academic updates that happen. The next one I believe is in January, but that is pretty late. What I would say is if you have 1 or 2 schools that are really kind of your #1 choice and your fall grades really have knocked it out of the park, I would send those transcripts right to the admissions dean. Alexa, my QR code isn't working. Okay, I'm going to ask Erica to look into that. We will figure that out. Don't worry about that. What's the main reason I didn't accept past applicants? I will say, right, so you have the idea of grades and boards where they need to be. Sometimes grades are high and boards are low. Sometimes grades are low and boards are high. You do like to see things line up. You do like to make sure that people's board scores reflect their abilities. But more so, I would say applications that don't really tell me much of anything. Personal statements that go on an absolute tangent about someone's grandfather and a health issue he had, and how you wanted to be a doctor. And 3 paragraphs about why you no longer want to be a doctor. And that would always bother me because you would say physician, not doctor, right? You need to make sure that things are shared in the same way. In the appropriate way for terminology, talking about dental tools instead of dental instruments. These little things really kind of hit wrong, right? So there's small things like that, but in the bigger picture, this needs to be well explained. Your personal statement needs to tell me about you and your motivation and your experiences. Your AADSAS needs to go into detail about the experiences you've had. Secondary applications need to answer the question that has been asked. So you have to pay close attention to these things. These are not tricks. Schools are not trying to trick you, but these are some of the things that people don't pay attention to. So read those secondary applications and then say to someone else, could you read the question and tell me if I've answered it here? People tend to go off on tangents that aren't addressing the main topic of the entire application. So that would really be a big picture thing for me when I was screening applications. You've got to tell me something about yourself. Let's see, is having only 4 things under my achievements section on my AADSAS okay? Oh yeah, that is rough. Most people only have a few, right? Because they ask very specifically for academic awards or things like that. So yeah, if you only have a couple, that's all right. Don't worry about that. It's the work and the activities where they want to see what you've done. You've been involved in the community. You've volunteered somewhere. You have dental experience. You've maybe done some research. The things that are rounding out what you're doing day in and day out. The idea of the awards and things like that is kind of an awkward part of the application, so don't worry too much about that. Does a letter of rec from a college pre-professional health advisor serve as a replacement letter for a science professor? If schools are asking for 2 letters from science professors and 2 others, you want to meet that criteria. You want to make sure you have hit the point. If you cannot get a letter from a second science professor or a third or whatever they're asking for, ask that pre-health advisor to explain in there why they are replacing that letter. That would hold a lot more weight if they were able to kind of tease that out and explain what the issue was. What would be a good number of schools to apply to? You don't want to apply to all the schools, right? Because there's also a timing issue here. You want to make sure that when secondary applications come in after the AADSAS has been submitted, you can turn them around in 10 days to 2 weeks, no later than that. So if you apply to every dental school in the country, you're going to be inundated and then have to prioritize and ultimately say, well, I'm not going to follow through with these 15. And then you've just simply wasted your money. So I usually say between 12 and 15 are good, although I have seen people apply to as many as 25. You want to make sure that you are in the realm of someone who's putting in a strong application. So again, you've got some good scores on your DATs. You've got boards or grades that if your GPA isn't where you want it to be, I can see a strong upward trend. And you've got good experience. If you're lacking in those areas, applying to more schools isn't necessarily going to make things work out. You can go on schools' websites and see what they're looking for with DATs and what they're looking for with GPAs, and you want to kind of try and meet that as best you can. When schools say, we want a letter from a science faculty, does this have to be a professor? What about a professor we TA'd for? Oh, that would be interesting. Someone you TA'd for or someone in their research lab. I absolutely would have accepted that. We want someone to talk about your ability in the sciences, right? If you were a TA, that would tell me that you had done well in that course. And even if that individual didn't teach you, he or she would be able to talk about your strength, not only with the subject matter, but with working with others, right? Being a TA and teaching others, and being responsible, right? Having a level of responsibility among your peers, that's a good thing. And certainly in the research lab, that would count for a science professor as well. Kind of like my TOEFL score to my application. Yeah, if you have taken it, schools want to see it, and there's a place for you to put it there. What goes under the achievements section? They give you examples. Dean's List would be one of them. That's a good question. Any award you might have received for anything, even if it's kind of a small community service thing given out by maybe your church or your community in any way, that anything that you've been formally recognized for. Well, looking at AADSAS, I don't see there's a hobby section. You can put that under activities, right? If you knit, if you play guitar, if you play violin, put that under the work and activity section. That's an activity. And you can also, if it's a really significant hobby, you can also put that, there's a place for that in your personal statement, although it wouldn't be kind of up at the top, right? The personal statement should be a bit of an inverted pyramid with the most important stuff at the top and things that are a little bit less important down at the bottom. And what I often have to remind people is don't waste the limited characters you have on a paragraph that sums everything up. That's just a waste. Tell me more about something. And instead of saying, in conclusion, and giving me a summary of a 1-page essay I've just read, you don't need to waste those characters. Every single character is important because you're trying to tell them as much as you can about yourself. Okay, I think we have about 2 or 3 more minutes because I started late. I want to try and get through these. Is it okay to take a gap year after graduating? Yes, volunteer shadowing gap year. That's fantastic. Schools love that. It's allowing you to mature. It's allowing you to kind of settle into what's coming, and it's showing a service orientation. That's fantastic. Most of my volunteering is related to dentistry. That's fine. You want to be a dentist, that's wonderful. You don't need it in any other areas, but if you want to branch out and do other things, that's fine. Do higher level science professors count as a science professor for recs? Yeah, no, they count, right? So if it's not the actual prereq biochem organic physics, but instead you have a microbiology professor or someone who taught you biochem 2 or something along those lines, that's just fine. Would being a lab tech help you on the application? Yes, right? Manual dexterity, that would be good. What professors count as science professors? Nutrition, micro, horticulture, anyone who can talk about your ability in the sciences, that would be good. I'm a dental assistant. Should I talk about it on my AADSAS application? Yes, you should. You should mention that in the personal statement. I want to know how you know about dentistry. And I think that it's important if you are a dental assistant that you share that information with me and what you've learned and how far you've come. Would I recommend reaching out to admissions to establish a connection? You can try, but it's not like undergrad. There is very little recruitment that dental schools do, that medical schools do, that PA programs do. None of the health professions do it because they don't need to do it. There are more people applying than they can accept. So it doesn't serve them well at all to do any formal recruitment. On occasion, schools will have info sessions, a Zoom link or maybe a pre-recorded something that you can go to. There are summer programs. If you're on the East Coast, Touro College does one. New Jersey Rutgers does Gateway to Dentistry. People do different programs. I think Stony Brook has one. So something to look into for sure. Summer dental education programs. If you can do those, they're wonderful, but they are few and far between. Why can it be seen as bad if someone graduates early? Not bad, but I don't want you coming in if you're too young and you don't have a lot of life experience. So if you're graduating or 2 and 2.5 years from college, maybe take an additional year and do some hardcore work or volunteering or something like that. So I know you're bringing a lot to the table instead of rushing through undergrad. There is the understanding that college is very expensive, and if you can get out a year or a semester early, you save money. That's a fantastic thing, and schools would not begrudge you that, but you want to make sure you're bringing enough experience to the table. Okay, I think this is going to be our last question. My prior experience as a medical assistant when I was a pre-med. Should I mention it? Absolutely. Not everyone started out being pre-dental. Talk about what you learned. Don't talk about the fact that you don't want to be a physician anymore. That speaks for itself because you're applying to dental school. Talk about what working as a medical assistant taught you about working with patients and about people. That's the most important thing. No need to talk about why you changed your mind. Talk about why you love dentistry and how that experience helped you understand patient care. And Valerie, I feel like I have to answer this final one. I work in the financial aid department at my university. Does that look good in my application? Absolutely, it does, right? Work study jobs are important. You understand a lot about financial aid. That's good. You're probably not going to miss any deadlines. So that's a good thing. Again, don't edit anything out that you do. Whatever you do, put it in there because it gives me, reading your application, a real kind of 360 sense of who you are, what you spend your time doing, and what college has been for you. Okay, I think we have gone quite a bit over, but I did start a little bit late because of my technological issues. I welcome all of you to reach out to me. I'm doing free appointments, as you can see through the QR code. We can do free 15-minute calls to see if there's any area I can help you and if you might be interested in working with me. And as I said, I'm offering 10% off of all packages between now and December 31st. That will extend into the next application cycle for sure. So it's been nice. I have enjoyed talking with you. These were great questions. You're all thinking about all the right things. I hope I get to work with some of you in the upcoming cycle or even in this cycle. If you're thinking of applying in this cycle, I do have personal statement packages that we can work on, right? We can go through and kind of make sure we pull that together and that it's going to get you noticed as best as possible at this point in the cycle. But I wish everyone well. Bye-bye.